All right. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about, which is actually going to be the last thing in the section, is also very important. And that's going to be the topic of absolute value. Absolute value is one of those things that's pretty easy, but has a big word, has a big name. So a lot of people get worried about it. Basically, the absolute value of a number is just telling you how far away that number is from zero. How many units of distance is that number away from zero? So the easiest way to do it is just to draw a number line and take a few examples. So here's a number line. Here's 0, 1, 2, 3. Of course, it goes on forever. -1, -2, -3. It goes on forever that direction. So if I were going to ask you, what is the absolute value of the number 3? Just regular old 3. All you have to do is take the number on the inside and write it down. That's the answer. The absolute value of that is 3 because the number of distance units the number 3 is away from 0 is simply 1, 2, 3. 3 distance units. All right, so the absolute value of 5 is 5 for the same reason, because if you have 4 out here and 5 out here, the distance that the number 5 is away from 0 is just simply 5. So you say, well, this is silly. Why are we even learning this? Well, the absolute value of -6 is equal to what? It's equal to 6. The absolute value of -2 is equal to what? It's equal to 2. And the reason is because if you look at -2 here, which is right here, how many distance units is that away from 0? It's 1 distance unit, 2 distance units away from 0. So yeah, the negative numbers do go on the other side of 0, true, but the absolute value, the value that you have independent of its sign, the distance that number is away from 0 is always going to be a positive number, even if the number itself is negative. And so you're just counting units. That's all you're doing. Practically speaking, all you have to do, if you have an absolute value of 10,347 negative, is just going to be 10,347. Whatever you have in the inside is what you write down as the absolute value. No matter if it's a positive number, the absolute value is positive. If it's a negative number, the absolute value is positive. So that concludes our section in real numbers and their graphs. You see, we've covered a tremendous amount of material. We've talked about numbers. We've talked about integers and all these categories of numbers, real numbers, rational numbers. All these things are just kind of can seem to be a little bit of mumbo jumbo, but you have to learn them. Number one, because you're going to be tested on them. But number two, it's sort of the language of math. If somebody says, "Hey, here's an integer in this equation," you need to know what the word integer means, because if you don't, you're just going to get scared by it. And the number one thing you need to realize is that if you understand something, and you build your confidence up, and when you do that, you know that you can conquer everything else that follows. I guarantee you, every one of you guys, when you were all babies, when I was a baby too, we learned how to speak in the English language. We didn't have a textbook. We didn't have a teacher. We just listened to people. And somehow out of all of that came the ability to use words, and then sentences, and then paragraphs, and then we can write things down and make long, stories if we want to. It's an incredible thing that a child can do, to learn how to speak without any books or anything. They're just listening by examples. They're listening to what people are saying, and they're putting it together, and their brain's putting it together. That is how I plan to teach this entire course, and all of my courses, is by examples. So rather than put a bunch of definitions on the board, really lengthy ones, like you'd see in a book, we're going to do it by working problems. We're going to do it by examples, so that if you see enough of these things, you'll realize, yeah, I do kind of understand how to add negative numbers together. I really do understand how to multiply fractions. I know how to solve equations because I've seen it done so many times. Building one skill at a time. I'm Jason. I hope you got something out of this lesson. Stick with me on this journey. I guarantee you that you'll be comfortable in algebra, but not only that, you'll be really, really good at it.